Hi, I'm Ian Hanomansing filling in for Rosie. Here's what's at issue this week. The federal government is facing increased political pressure and new questions around its response to election meddling attempts by China.
On what date will the Prime Minister bring in a foreign influence registry? Has CSIS warned the Prime Minister, his staff, members of his party, that members of his caucus or cabinet are part of a foreign interference network? Yes or no?
Why does the Prime Minister just launch a public inquiry and answer all those questions and give confidence to Canadians in our democracy?
Those questions come just days after the Prime Minister promised to appoint a special rapporteur on election interference.
Canadians know that foreign interference is not and should never be a partisan issue. That's why we'll be appointing an independent expert to identify any gaps in our system.
So what should we make of the government's response, and what are the political consequences? Let's bring in our panelists, Chantal Hebert, Andrew Coyne, Althia Raj. And Andrew, I'll start with you. You wrote in the Globe and Mail that Wednesday was a gruesome day for the Prime Minister, given the latest reporting on the China interference story. Is the Prime Minister doing the right thing by calling for a rapporteur instead of an inquiry?
Well, he could do a lot more before that. I mean, it was a gruesome day, not only because of the reports that came out that fleshed out this reporting that we've seen earlier about what he was told, what people in his office were told about Chinese interference in ways that are pretty hard to dismiss as just simply a rogue CSIS operative. I mean, it was his own National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, to use that long term, that was reporting this. And like all the other reports he seems to receive from that committee, he ignored them. But it was how he responded, or in fact didn't respond to it. He was facing a series of questions from the media, which he simply refused to answer. He was then asked a series of basically factual questions in Parliament by Pierre Poilevre, who had a much better day than he had previously. He came out way too hot, you know, a couple of days ago, basically accusing the Prime Minister of treason, but simply asking him a series of factual questions which the Prime Minister manifestly and obviously failed to, refuse to answer. It just made him look really bad. So, you know, the only reason we need an inquiry is to get him to answer these questions. But he could avoid the inquiry. He doesn't have to call a rapporteur. He doesn't have to do any of this stuff, really, but just sit down and answer questions. He could hold a press conference tomorrow. He could go in front of the committee and answer questions. So he's making this to look like, he's trying to make this look like it's this really complicated, deep, dark secrets that are involved here, when in fact the basics of this, of what did the Prime Minister know and when did he know it, are pretty simple and are absolutely within his power to answer.
Chantal, how damaging has this topic become for the Liberals?
That is frankly hard to tell, and I'm not so sure that it's the most important question at this point. The Liberals probably think it is, and the sense you get from them is that they think this will all blow over and people will move on. They probably get that sense from the fact that Aaron O'Toole went hard at the Liberals over China issues for as long as he was leader, and it didn't pay off in terms of votes. It never really had a lot of traction. But to go back to Andrew's point, if people assumed, and rightly on Monday, that they were witnessing a course correction when the Prime Minister announced all these steps, whatever you may have thought of them, the rest of the week kind of completely defeated what happened on Monday. It was just evasions after evasions, filibuster in a committee. And I'm with Andrew on this. There are answers. They can't be that hard to give. They don't involve national security. They could be given within the purview of a parliamentary committee. And if the government wants to convince Canadians that it has something to hide, over the past 2 weeks, it has probably convinced more Canadians of that fact than the alternative.
All right, Althia, weigh in on this.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I think the issue has been mismanaged from the beginning in terms of the Prime Minister, first of all, trying to sweep the issue under the rug. There's nothing to see here, folks. And then refusing to answer very clear questions. And I agree with Andrew and Chantal that most of the questions he probably has answers to. And in fact, most of the illuminating responses we've had on this have actually come from committee. On Thursday morning, we had Dominic LeBlanc, the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, tell us that actually one of the reasons why the Liberals decided to go with the special rapporteur is because They felt that if they were going to announce a public inquiry, the opposition would criticize them on the terms of the inquiry. And I don't think they're wrong about that. I'm not sure that there was a win-win there. But we don't have answers. I feel like the Conservatives, I think to Andrew's earlier point, have come out too hot to the point where they're name-calling, insinuating that the Prime Minister is not loyal to Canada, that he's been in the pocket of China for the last decade, confusing issues that, you know, like the Trudeau Foundation has nothing to do with the Prime Minister, and using theater to get to answers which kind of trivializes the whole thing. But if the Prime Minister wanted to help clear the air, he absolutely could go to a parliamentary committee. Instead of having Liberals filibuster to prevent his Chief of Staff from testifying, the Prime Minister should say, hey, ministerial accountability, I'm willing to go testify in her place. Ask me all the questions you want, and the ones that I can't answer, I will.
So, Althia, given the allegations and really what appears to be evidence of Chinese meddling in the Canadian political process, and as you say, the allegations made by the Conservatives, too hot or not, but, you know, do you think this is having sort of a damaging impact on the part of Canadians just in terms of trust in our democracy?
Absolutely. I mean, I think back on the Mahara stuff, the leaks in those cases were eventually found to be completely unsubstantiated. We don't know the quality. I don't know. I'm not privy to these leaks. I have not seen any of the documents that the Globe and Mail is reporting on or Global. So I don't really know what to make of them. But I think an impression is left here that there's something incredibly nefarious happening that is causing people to distrust our electoral process. There are already people who are, I don't know how to say this politely, but who have started to believe conspiracy theories since the pandemic, who have excuses to believe more conspiracy theories. And we really do need to do something to calm the air. I know Abacus Data pollster David Coletto has some numbers coming out tomorrow that basically show as many Conservative as Liberals want to see a public inquiry, because I think people want to see the air cleared.
Andrew, you said the Prime Minister could just simply answer a lot of these questions in a news conference. You know, given where we're at tonight, what should he do next?
He should answer those questions. I don't think he will. And I think one is entitled to draw some inferences about his refusal to answer simple questions. You know, either his party has received illegal cash donations from the Chinese government indirectly via intermediaries, or it hasn't. If it hasn't, where's the harm in saying so? Either he was told that the Chinese government was essentially handpicking candidates, or he was not told that. He can confirm or deny that. We're not even getting denials, basically, from this, except a very narrow technical denial, of, you know, carefully worded, often repeated about, I did not have information on cash going to candidates, which is, you know, directly from China, which is not necessarily what's been alleged. So it is within his power to clear it up. I think it is, you know, there's a kind of reverse conspiracy theory where you're presented with compelling testimony that something is up here, whether you don't want to go off and convict anybody on this, but that there are serious questions to be answered. And I don't think we can just wave that away and say, oh, well, who can say it's all just hearsay. This is coming from multiple sources. This is not just raw data. This is stuff that's been assessed in the Privy Council office, in the NSI COP committee. This is not raw intelligence anymore. This is things that were given a great deal of consideration and passed on to the Prime Minister's office, and nothing apparently happened after that.
Chantal, on the... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think some Liberal strategists probably thought it was clever to say we're going to have a special rapporteur to deal with all this, which might have been clever 2 weeks ago. But to be clever on Monday, it should have been announced with a name on the job. Absent that name, I think the Liberals are about to discover that they're going to be digging themselves in rather than clearing the air, in the sense that after this week, how many eminent Canadians really want to accept that brief that Justin Trudeau wants to hand to someone? And how many will want to sacrifice credibility capital by finding a way to explain that there shouldn't be a public inquiry, while the momentum behind that idea has continued to gather steam? To go back to your first question about impact, I don't know if it will change votes, but I do know that it's undermining Liberal morale in caucus and within the ranks of the Liberal Party.
quick final question to you, Althia. I've seen some reaction, both on the radio show that I do on Sundays, Cross Country Checkup, but also on social media from people who are saying this is not as big an issue as the media is making it to be. It's playing right into the hands of the Conservatives. How important an issue is this?
I don't know. Like, that's the truth. I don't know, because I don't know what the actual information in these leaks is. I don't have enough information to judge whether or not this is absolutely outrageous and the government should fall. Because, I mean, you know, Andrew has painted this as either the Prime Minister knew or he didn't know. You know, either he knew about this money or he didn't know. But it's possible that he wasn't made aware, or that he's unsure. I think that's something that we have to take into account, right? You don't want a Prime Minister to come out and categorically deny something that is false if he doesn't know if it's false.
Welcome to another round of At Issue. This week, the leader of the official opposition said the 3 Conservative MPs who met with a far-right German politician will stay in his caucus. Pierre Poilevre previously condemned Christine Anderson's views, calling them racist and vile in a written statement, but he turned attention back onto the Prime Minister.
Right now, what I'm more concerned about is the vile and racist views of the Prime Minister. You should be asking him, how many times did he dress up in these costumes? How many other times are there that we don't know about?
So is this political messaging effective? Let's bring back our panelists, Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. And Althia, what do you make of Pierre Poilievre's response to this week?
It's typical Pierre Poilevre. This is the way he normally operates. I think there's 2 things happening. One, he realizes that there is pressure from what he would call mainstream media to get a categorical condemnation for these 3 MPs having met with this very controversial politician. So he issues a statement on their behalf, not they themselves issuing a statement, but without consultation, it appears, having issued a statement on their behalf. And then the other thing is the attack on the Prime Minister, like him turning the tables. This is something we see in question period all the time, but I think it's part of a greater strategy, which is frankly voter suppression, turning people off politics completely so they get disgusted, so people decide, you know, it's not worth listening to politics, I'm not going to bother to vote. This is a tried and true tactic, and frankly, it works.
So, I mean, that's a really interesting analytical point, but you actually believe that that is part of the strategy here, just to turn people off from politics?
Absolutely.
No.
I
go ahead.
I have a bit of a different take on it, and it's not specific to this particular issue, but I've been watching since Mr. Poilievre decided to give more news conferences. I've been watching them, and he's not very good at them. That is, he can only play offense, and he's very poor at playing defense. And what I'm curious to see is his reply this week, or his attempt to throw it back to Justin Trudeau. Canadians have had 2 elections to cast their judgment on the events that he refers to. It's kind of dated, but it saves him from trying to actually articulate a solid defense of his stance vis-a-vis those MPs. But I looked at that and I wondered, how does someone who responds like that get through a 40-day election campaign and 2 or 3 leaders' debates? Because you will not, in an election campaign, be able to play offense every single day and every single scrum. And if you can't defend your positions, articulate a defense, you will eventually wear out your welcome on voters.
Andrew, I'm curious, as you watched that news conference, the questions, legitimate questions about his 3 MPs, with his answers deflecting to Trudeau's conduct. What did you think?
Well, I mean, the good news is he didn't actually say, yeah, I'm glad they met with her. She's a hero of mine, which is, in the leadership race, he might well have done when he was, bringing coffee out to the convoy people. But he now realizes he's got to at least nod in the direction of the mainstream voter. We saw in that by-election that they still have a lot of work to do to reach suburban voters in central Canada. So he's kind of stuck in between there, where he doesn't want to annoy the base, annoy the people who elected him leader, but he doesn't want to completely go all in on that. And so as Chantal said, he's not very good under fire. He's good on the attack, not so good on the defense. What about what you guys did may work tolerably well in Parliament, where everyone kind of discounts it all as being part of the game. It's a little harder when you're out in the public eye, outside of the confines of Parliament. It really looks as lame as it was. It looks like he didn't have a good answer to that, and just left him looking stranded. I mean, he's issued that statement through a series of tweets, basically denouncing them. And we had this leaked story that he read them the riot act in caucus, behind closed doors in caucus. But out in public, he hasn't been willing to go to the further step of actually saying, I disown this, I denounce this, and it's going to hurt him. That kind of thing is going to get replayed against him during the campaign.
But when you say it's going to hurt him, Andrew, hurt him with who?
With the voters that he needs to reach. You know, they go back and forth, the Tories. Should we just kind of wind up the base, just gin up the base and get them really angry and win on turnout? Or do we need to reach across and get voters who aren't already voting for us? And they've tried both of them and they haven't succeeded very well. But the most likely scenario is going to be that you start to persuade fed up Liberal voters, and they've got lots of reasons to be fed up, that they can give you a look and put you in power. And you're not going to do it with this kind of dancing around.
There's, a news conference, even when you're playing defense, is in part a seduction exercise. You're not playing to the journalists who are pushing you with questions. You're playing to that larger audience, and you want people who are not on your team to say, well, this guy looked solid.
Yeah.
And that's not what those news conferences and the tone of them, whenever the tables are turned and it's not about please attack Justin Trudeau so we can write it down. The seduction aspect is not only lost, it becomes a repulsion exercise.
Althia, we have just a minute, but I mean, maybe Andrew's right. Do you think that rather than turn people off on politics, it may actually motivate some people to vote?
I'll believe it when I see it. I think, two things. One, I just want to go back to this idea that Pierre Poilevre read them the riot act. He told them, all caucus, that they should be careful who they meet with and they should screen the people that they meet with. But nobody in the Conservative caucus believes that Dean Allison and Colin Carey and Leslyn Lewis did not actually know who they were meeting with. And if you really want to send a message, you punish people. Leslyn Lewis sits on the front bench of the Conservative in the House of Commons. If Mr. Poilievre wanted to say your behavior was not appropriate, I don't agree with this, he would have booted her to the back benches. Yep. He did not make any punishment, levy any punishment against these MPs.
That's right.
The second thing, I would love to believe that Chantal and Andrew are right, that the public will not like this, but I think we have to think also about the reporters in these press conferences. If this campaign lasts for 40 days, when Mr. Poilievre doesn't like the question, he goes full on the attack, personal or not, against the issue that you're talking about or the reporter asking the question. And that gets really grating. Like, we don't want to actually fight with the members of Parliament. We just want to ask them legitimate questions and get answers. And I don't know that is something that the public will necessarily see because they're watching all these press conferences. They'll get snippets, and that snippet will be the message track that Mr. Poilievre wants to deliver.
Yeah, but again,
but not in a leaders' debate. You can't play that game for 2 hours.
But in the press conferences, you can.
But even then, you can't really convert your inability to answer questions into the media are all against me. You can do that with your base because they'll believe that till the end of time. But you can't do it with the voters who aren't already committed to you. You just look weak.
I have to say, it's fantastic watching you guys. It's a lot of fun filling in for 1 week for Rosie and actually doing this. And thanks to all of you, but we're at full time. Thank you.